What's up, guys? I am your local hopeless historian, and today we're going to be watching a video about the military comfort woman and statue erected in New Jersey that had a little bit of issue and controversy. So let's get into it. And before we get into this video, I want to make sure that it's explicitly clear that I am not anti-Japanese. I am not anti-anybody in this situation. I simply just study the forced labor and sexual slavery during the Second World War, and I'm starting to become a historian, and I believe that these are topics that should be covered among the other things that I cover on this channel. Alright, so this statue in particular was put up about a half an hour away from where I grew up in New Jersey.
Next to the memorials for the two world wars and the Korean War is a memorial for war victims many may know little, if anything, about. They were called comfort women, about 200,000 Korean, Chinese, and other Asian women who
There were
were
also
lured to
about 400
Japan
Europeans,
during World War
primarily
II
Dutch, if
and
I remember
forced into
correct.
slavery.
Inspiration of design was reading some of the testimonies of the former comfort women and how they would cower in the corner, how abusive they would, not just being raped, but they were being beaten by some of the soldiers. They said the officers were far worse than the average soldier.
The memorial sits on the grounds of the public library in Palisades Park, a borough where Koreans now make up the majority of the population and where...
Okay, so when this particular statue was erected, there were two delegations of Japanese officials that visited this city, and they wanted this removed. So they offered initially to donate books to the library. I don't know if it was all the libraries within the city or if it was just that particular one. They also offered to plant cherry blossom trees and to something to the effect of these words: do something to show that we are more together than divided. That was legitimately to the effect of what they said. They didn't really state what that was. The second delegation was far more abrasive and demanding of the removal of the statue.
Korean language signs dominate the business district. The memorial has been met with controversy, with some saying it doesn't belong on public property because it may offend Japanese residents and others. But Mayor James Rotundo says it's serving its purpose well.
This monument was not for the Korean women, and we've made that clear to them in the beginning. This was for the comfort women who had suffering, and it was for educational purposes so that the world and people knew when things during war, the travesties that happen should never happen.
My generation, people, we don't know about the comfort women, but I think we need that kind of the statue.
The memorial, which has been here for nearly 2 years, has created quite the diplomatic issue. Members of the Japanese government even came here to ask for its removal. Mayors of New Jersey boroughs don't often find themselves in the middle of an international incident, so Rotundo was surprised when the Japanese ambassador paid him a visit. He was told that the Japanese government has officially apologized for its actions and made...
Okay, so the Japanese government didn't necessarily apologize. Well, they did technically apologize, but they more so recognized what they did with the 1993 Kono statement. They didn't necessarily... They did some apologies. They also made a lot of false promises in trying to build a fund and, increasing education on the comfort woman topic, but they really didn't follow through with a lot of that. In fact, they actually have a lot of issues to the contrary in trying to have people trying to suppress the information of the comfort woman. Particularly out of Sophia University Joshi Daigaku in Tokyo, a graduate student was attempting to make, or did make, a documentary based off the comfort woman and was actively sued by, I believe, a conservative group, a certain conservative political group of Japan. More or less saying that he got a lot of the information incorrect, and that essentially he was trying to paint the Japanese in the most negative light that he possibly could.
War reparations, and then was asked to take it down, which he refused. Recently, the Chinese sent warships to disputed islands to protest the Japanese position on comfort women, which escalated last weekend when Japan temporarily recalled its ambassador to China. And some Japanese living here say this memorial is historically inaccurate. because it fails to mention that Japanese women were also victims of the Imperial Army and that many of the comfort women came to Japan voluntarily.
I hope they need to correct the contents because content is wrong.
Okay, so yes, there were Japanese that were part of the comfort system. If I absolutely remember correct, they were initially going to actual prostitutes and asking them to come and participate. And when that ran out, they stopped going to official prostitutes and they started essentially human trafficking, kidnapping, and basic, sexual slavery practices of the day and even today. So yes, there were Japanese that were victims of this system. There were volunteers, for a lack of a better term. But the thing is, you say many, I don't know how you can distinguish the number that is many in this situation. And I don't know if, even if there was volunteers for this, I don't think they knew what they were signing up for when it came to what the comfort women system would actually be. So there might have been volunteers. There were Japanese women that were affected by this, I know that. But I don't think anybody that volunteered for this could have fathomed what they would have gone through as a result of them agreeing to either be prostitutes or service, for a better term, the Japanese soldiers. There is no way that anybody could realistically ever agree to doing something like that and be of sane mind.
This is a town that is undergoing a huge demographic shift. A few years ago, old-time residents complained about too many Korean language store signs.
I just wish I spoke
among
Korean.
People with different backgrounds is not new here. No matter which side of the issue you fall on, the memorial seems to have accomplished one goal. People are talking about a war atrocity few learn about. In Palisades Park, Andrew Schmertz, NJ Today.
Okay, so yeah, essentially, the issue of the military comfort women statues is still an issue. There are statues in Greendale, Greendale, California. There are statues in Berlin, Australia, and South Korea, and I don't know if there are any other nations. And all of them have had active protests by the Japanese government for being put in. We will cover those at some point in the future, maybe in this series of videos. But I've actually presented two papers on this, more so with the memorial issues in Greendale, or is it Glendale, California, and the Japanese government has been pretty proactive in trying to shut down the conversation around these war crimes and atrocities.